All right, so let's do this cooking and chatting. Today we're making cauliflower crust pizza, and I have Don Desroches here with me. Let me just adjust. So we're gonna be talking about relationship wellness and make some damn good cauliflower pizza crust because he made it the other day. It tastes really, really good. And just a heads up, I know Don now for 5 months.
5 months.
5 months, and little by little I started learning a little bit more about relationships and feelings and stuff. He has been helping me to open up my mind a lot, right? So I hope we can all get a nice kick of wellness out of this talk and this delicious pizza afterwards. Do you want to say anything?
No, I'm ready to get started. So we have to get all the ingredients first.
Yeah,
right?
so we are gonna make the pizza and we are gonna talk about the wellness and try to not fight. Has been tough these days.
You think so?
I think now just like one hand is good that you have someone around and you're not by yourself.
Yes.
But the other hand can become very overwhelming for people that have no choice. We still have a choice. Some people have no choice. And then, they might get caught into going through a hard time, especially because first, you can't run away. Second, you can't go to the bar and just get drunk and come back home. And and then there's not many ways to you to find wellness. If you don't feel well, it's hard to treat the other person well. So this is part of the program about how to find wellness within yourself so we can be better people with other people. But anyway, we are going to start with the ingredients. So there are two options, right?
Yes,
or maybe
for the cauliflower, yes. So it's either one cauliflower head, or you can also get the frozen cauliflower rice, which then we'll show you how to microwave if you would rather do that. It's a little bit easier than this approach, but we're going to actually do it the...
Do you remember how much the one bag of the frozen
16 ounces,
16 ounces, and that's enough to make one whole pizza.
Yep.
Yeah.
One whole pizza.
One
right.
whole pizza. So anyway, all right, we are going to be making with the cauliflower itself, but we are going to talk about how to make with the cauliflower rice. The other day you made with the cauliflower rice, but at the pool, at the group, I asked it how we should make it, and it was kind of like split decision, so we are going to make from scratch.
Yeah.
So pretty much you need a cauliflower or 16 ounces of frozen cauliflower rice, right? Then 16 ounces of shredded mozzarella.
That's here.
That Don shredded already.
Yeah.
I left everything for him to do because that's me. 2 eggs.
2 eggs, yes.
2 eggs. Please go ahead, grab your stuff. Please join through Zoom if you're available. It's always nice to chat
Yes,
because
2
we're
eggs.
gonna open up for questions as well. 2 eggs, then 8 ounces of pizza sauce.
Got that?
And I have a story about this. My homemade tomato sauce is really, really good, and I'm gonna make a little chat on Zoom to teach you how to do it. I made it for the pizza we made the other day. He didn't want to use it. He decided to use this and pretended he didn't know about it. But anyway, that's me, right? And then oregano.
Yes.
Grated Parmesan cheese.
We have that. Oregano.
Oregano. And olive oil.
Olive oil.
Olive oil.
Virgin.
Virgin. I was going to say we like virgin, but that's not true. Anyway.
I'm going to start cutting this open. And what else do we need?
So that's it. That's what we need.
The one thing I do want to say too is that I always use a cookie sheet because I like to bring up the edges. When I put the crust in, I like to bring the edges up so that this way there's no sauce. I don't put any sauce on the edges of the pizza. Mm-hmm. So I make it come up on the cookie sheet a little bit. Some people may want to do it a different way, and that's okay with you. Maybe you just follow our recipe and you can make some modifications later on your own.
So, all right. So now we have the time, right? So if you have your cauliflower with you, you're going to start cutting, then we're going to wash it. And now we're going to get into the topic, right? Relationship wellness. So, I was talking previously about it, though, like how would we approach the situation, what he thinks is the most important thing, what is people lacking nowadays in their relationships. I didn't introduce him, I'm so sorry, I didn't talk about his background. So first,
is that important?
I'm going to start with the personal life. Don was married twice, that makes him a warrior, or his ex-wives are really a warrior here, and so that makes him very experienced on the subject at first. And second, he has been. Oh, we are shaking a lot on the table, huh?
Oh,
so
it's over here.
no, maybe we shake less. So Don works as a mediator into people that want to get divorced and don't want to battle in court. So they tend to find a mediator to try to solve things without going to court. So that gives him some experience about how to approach the couples and what he still sees people struggling with. And and he has a huge curiosity on the topic, so that makes it like even more interesting. So anyway, Don, if you could say what do you think is the main thing that goes nowadays with the relationships? What's the main thing that people are lacking and not paying attention?
Well, there's one thing that actually, not just I think with romantic relationships, it's also just relationships in general with anybody.
You mean family, like mom to son,
it could be any,
husband, wife,
it could be any
friends.
relationship, because the reason why it gets brought out in a romantic relationship is because there's such an emotional connection that you care more about what that person says more than anybody else. So that's the reason why it gets highlighted more in romantic relationships.
And you're spending such a long time with the person that you are with, right?
Possibly. I mean, a lot of people spend a lot of time with work and relationships with work, but they're not as intense because there's not the emotional connection, and that's really what brings up a lot of issues. So the one thing that I like to talk about is listening skills. And this is something that would go across the board with anybody, any relationship, whether it's your family, your friends, your work relationships. It's really important that you have good listening skills.
Listening skills. So this is something hard to practice nowadays. I feel like, especially when we are overwhelmed with like time on the screen and work, it's really hard to stay present. Right, present, paying attention where you are instead of your mind spinning around. So I give credit to what he's saying. Of course, it's hard to listen. Generally, you just ask and you're not listening anymore. Your mind is spinning around. But I just want to bring the heads up to it because I do think it's a big issue. You ask a question and then your mind's already spinning into another thing. It's like you're not even paying attention on the answer anymore.
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons why people do that. When you're not in a romantic relationship, you also, a lot of times when you're at work, you're not maybe listening because you're trying to think of a smart response. Like you don't want the other person maybe to think that you're not knowledgeable of your subject or that sort of thing. So you may be in your head thinking about the answer or response to them before you're actually listening to their whole statement. So that's one issue there.
Yeah, you feel that in the sessions. That's what you feel. People are more like worried about the impression they are causing than really engaging into the conversation.
Exactly. And then in romantic relationships, a lot of the times we feel like we're being accused of things. So when we feel like we're being accused of things, then we want to... Oh, look at, you're laughing.
No, I just
you
can't
have some experience of this.
I just can't think about my ex-marriage, it's just,
Yeah, so...
Especially when you're not coming from a good loop already, it has been rolling for some time, right?
Yep, exactly. So I think people, especially if you've been in a relationship for a long time, it's very easy to get on the defensive side, and you want to defend your position. You want to basically say, because everybody wants to be looked at like a good person. right? Everybody wants to be a good person. They want to be perceived as a good person. And if somebody is telling and accusing them of things, then they basically want to, all they're thinking about is, how can I tell my side of the story?
Okay, I like that, and I asked him about this before. The big thing he says is listening. But there is this other side of how the message is being communicated, right? How you're passing that message. So I remember Philip. I remember Philip in the beginning of our marriage saying, "You're just like your mom. You're just like your mom." And at the beginning, I was so mad at him, like, "What? I'm just not like my mom." And then with time, because I'm a humble person, I believe I started thinking, "Am I just like my mom?" And I started seeing, yes, he's right. I'm just like my mom. But it took some time for me to start realizing it. And, some things I was able to change, some other things I wasn't able to change. But I think if he had approached that information towards me in a different way, like,
there is a
Lou,
way.
do you see how, you have a hard time remembering where you put your things? Like, you always forget where they are? Your mom is quite like that, isn't she? That I think would be different than, you're just like your mom. You don't remember anything. It's like, I think
there's another approach too, because one of the things, like if I feel like you're forgetting things, I'm putting it on you instead of putting it on me. Like I have to really put it on me. Like the approach could be, I feel very frustrated when you don't remember certain things. Like I feel frustrated when I feel like you're not remembering things. Because you're not remembering, you may not be remembering things, or your partner may not be remembering things because it's not as important to them as it is to you. Right? So if there's something that needs to be taken care of or brought, or maybe there's something that needs to be in the car when you're going to somebody's house, it may mean a lot more to that person, to your spouse or your partner, than the other person, and that's why they don't remember. So, but it feels very frustrating to the person who wants to bring those things or who wants those things to be remembered.
And
does that make sense?
It does make sense, and this is how we are gonna. I hope I can attach this to the end of the conversation, talking about the 5 love languages. Like it's just clear to me now. Like we have different ways to feel loved and love other people, and sometimes you and your partner are just not in the same perspective. And once you don't realize these things, it's really hard to attend each other's expectations. But once you start understanding these things, things get better. So what he's saying, right, what you were saying right now is like, so things that might not be important to me, it's important to the other person, and that's why it bothers so much the other person, but doesn't bother me because,
Right, but the thing is,
care less.
But it is important from one side. I mean, we'll talk about the receiver and not the speaker. So the person who's receiving the message, the person who's speaking, the technique should be to not put the blame on the other person. I think when people talk about things that bother them, they're accusing the other person of something. I think that accusation has to be directed inward. So the accusation has to be, if I'm the one speaking, it has to be directed to me. And how it affects me.
So instead of, like you said before, instead of like, you forget everything all the time, it's like it really bothers.
I get frustrated.
That you just forget things all the time, or
well,
maybe
or
not
no.
all that
I wouldn't
way.
say I wouldn't necessarily say all the time, but what I would say is something similar to that of like it. I get frustrated when you forget the things that are important to me.
I want to connect that to someone that I was talking from the handball team, and she was saying how frustrated she gets because her husband doesn't help her with the daily things in the house, even though he has other qualities, right? So I think that would be a good approach, right? I get frustrated that you don't pick up the laundry, right? You just like, I get frustrated that I always know, you see that you leave your thing there on the floor. Why don't you just fucking get that thing?
Yeah. So obviously it doesn't bother him.
No, it doesn't
when
bother
stuff
him at all.
when stuff is on the floor, it doesn't bother him. So
bothers her.
accusing him of leaving stuff on the floor, it's almost like it's telling somebody, well, you're telling me something that really doesn't like impact me. But if you say to them like, hey, this really bothers me, like I really get frustrated, like I walk in and this really upsets me. When things are all over the floor, it really upsets me. So it's using I statements instead of you. You did this. You left that stuff. You didn't.
But that is going to come down to the fact that the person is listening as well, right?
Yes. Well, that's the other side that we're going to talk about as well. I do want to make the rice. And then
so now we put the cauliflower inside of the food.
The food processor, a Ninja. You don't have to have a Ninja. You could just have a food processor. And I'm just going to make rice out of it and put it into this bowl, which is also a microwavable, microwave safe bowl. You can use something like this or anything in your house that works.
If you're going to use the cauliflower rice.
Well, I'm going to make the rice.
Yes.
I'm going to put it in here, and then I'm going to transfer it to the steamer.
You're not listening.
And I'm going to transfer it to the steamer basket.
So this is how you're going to make with the cauliflower. If you already have the cauliflower rice, just hang in there and we're going to guide you through it. So right now you're just going to turn the cauliflower into cauliflower rice over the food.
Right. Okay, that was easy. If you have one of these, if you don't, a blender will work too, but it just takes a lot more time. Put that in here.
All right.
I like to take the chunks out, so.
Do you need a spoon?
Chop those up. No. Oh yes, a spoon would be good when we're finished.
Feel free to join through Zoom, right? Feel free to start typing your questions or anything.
We're gonna put this piece, the rest of the cauliflower in here, and then we're gonna start this off. So as you can see, if anybody hasn't seen cauliflower rice before, you'll see how it kind of makes it look like rice. That's why they call it that. So, then we take out the rest here, pour it in the bowl, and if you have the frozen cauliflower rice, you're going to take that. Now, some of them, they say that you can steam the bag. You can steam the bag in the microwave, or you can, you put the bag in the microwave as is. You can do that if you want. Some people feel uncomfortable putting plastic in there.
I feel uncomfortable. You shouldn't put anything wrapped in plastic in your food in the microwave. All the toxins from the plastic go straight to what you're gonna eat, but you can go without that information. Sorry.
Right. Well, that's okay, and that's the wellness. It's important that I understand Louise is really passionate about wellness, so that's why I bring it up with the plastic. Once you have you can empty the rice, the frozen rice, into one of these bowls, and you can an option is to cover it with saran wrap, which Louise again doesn't like because it's plastic, but you can cover it with something else also. So the idea is to keep the heat in here so that it makes the rice very tender. So we're gonna transfer this right now to a steamer basket, and we're gonna steam it for 10 to 15 minutes until this is tender, and that will be the next step.
All right, so feel free to throw your questions out there or join through Zoom. Meanwhile, I really would love to be talking to you right now. Please feel free to reach out. But all these conversations, like when I think about my ex-relationships, and one thing I think is very unusual about Don is he actually listens. So that's kind of unusual in a man. Not taking women out of the line, but it's really weird how he actually listens. And when I look back to my ex-relationship, it's like very clear now, especially now, because I don't have those emotions surrounding my brain anymore. I'm disconnecting my emotions from my ex-marriage, and I'm able to look at my ex-husband with with more distance now, in a more rational way, and being able to wow, he just doesn't listen at all. Or even read the message, like I text him and it's like go through one ear, comes out through the other. And that is going to, I like to connect that to the fact that it's so hard for people nowadays to stay present, to just keep attention into where they are and what they are doing, especially when it's something that keeps recurring day by day. Your relationship with your kids, your relationship with your husband or with your wife is like becomes something that is always there, and suddenly is not interesting anymore, different from you just turning on the phone and listening to us talk or something different, right? It's like when I feel that when it comes to that routine, it's easy to disconnect and start thinking about things you gotta do, and then you're not paying attention anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one thing I do want to talk about is the steamer basket. Some people may not know what a steamer basket is. I don't mean to insult your intelligence, but this is a steamer basket. It's got a cover. I put the cauliflower in here, the rice cauliflower, and then you see the bottom has holes. So I'll put it in another container that has water, and once that water boils, the water will go through here and then the steam vapor will come out of the top here. Okay?
Okay. Anyway, yeah, and one of the things that changed before I finally got divorced is because I really, really wanted to. First, I wanted my marriage to work. That's what I really wanted. And that's when I started meditating. And that was like in the beginning of the meditation, always would come the message, what's your purpose? Why are you meditating? And always would come the message of saving my marriage. But what I've learned through meditation is to keep my emotions in control and being able to stay attentive to what was going on. And that's finally when I started understanding why my relationship with Philip wasn't working anymore, right? Being able to take my decisions and look from the outside, pay attention from the outside, and start walking to a better direction that I thought so. So I think listening to the other person, it's of course is very important, but practicing to be present, right? The person start talking, you're like, let me think about something else because I don't want to listen. Sometimes you just don't want to listen, or sometimes you just like programmed to just block that message and not allow the message to get to you anymore. And that came to the question that I did to Don, and I'm going to do it again, like, is there any techniques when you can train to be able to listen or to communicate better with your partner?
So this is a really difficult thing because over the years of divorcing people, over the past 10 years, I find that you see these things happen between the couple and you see how they communicate with each other, and this is how they've communicated maybe from the beginning when things were really good in the beginning, maybe the first 6 months, year, 2 years, everything was really good and everybody was happy, and then over time they go into these habits of like not listening to the person because maybe they just, it's over time they kind of get into this habit of how they're communicating together. So one of the things that I always tell people is like, even though the person may be accusing you, like your spouse or your partner may be accusing you of something, you have to not take it personally. And there's people who come to me and say like, what? How could I not take it personally? She's basically telling me I didn't get the right peas at the store. Like she's telling me I got the wrong peas. Now maybe these are peas that I like, but I'm being told that they're the wrong peas. So that's just one example. So the thing is like I have to not take it personally because the person who's speaking has pain. There's pain that they're trying to communicate to me. As a spouse, as a partner, they're trying to communicate their pain to me. So the first thing I want to do is make sure that I'm facing, eye contact, and I want to make sure that I'm being very attentive to what they're saying, maybe nodding, yes. Wait till there's a break in the conversation, and then say, I'm sorry you feel that way.
That's a good practice, huh?
Yeah, so that's the first thing. I'm sorry that you feel this way. Okay. It has nothing to do with me. There's absolutely nothing to do, but I'm sorry that you're feeling this pain. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry that I put you into this position where you feel pain. There's nothing wrong with taking blame. Mm-hmm. And saying, I'm sorry that I put you in this position where you're feeling all this pain. And
even though if you don't agree?
Well, you don't really know what the
You don't wanna
situation
judge,
is.
you just
You
listen.
can't judge. Yeah, that's the thing. You can't judge the person because that person went through experiences that you have never gone in. As you can hear the whistling in the background, maybe that is the steaming happening of the cauliflower. So, but you don't. You want to take that person's pain. You want to share in their pain because this is your partner.
Could you bring a different example besides the peas? Because the peas they don't.
Yeah, well, you brought up an example before about the clothes on the floor.
Oh
right?
yeah, to me
So
was
the
such a
clothes
big
are on
deal.
the floor. So now your spouse, let's say it's the woman, says to the man, "Why are you leaving your underwear on the floor? Why are you leaving all those clothes? You take off your clothes in the bedroom and you just leave them there. We have a hamper over there. Why are you doing this?" So as the man who's hearing this, he really should say, "I'm sorry that I put you in this painful situation where you're so frustrated. I can see your frustration." You have to validate the person and validate what they're saying first. I have to repeat back what I heard. So it's
Repeat
like,
back what you heard. I think that's a good technique, right? Because then
Yes.
you're really listening.
right, because
The person
I
said
heard you
something.
say that I leave my clothes and my underwear on the floor and I don't put it in the hamper. I am sorry that I made you feel this way. I'm sorry that I made you so frustrated.
Okay, so we are getting this approach, like how we can be better listeners, right?
Exactly. Better
So this
listeners with
better
anybody.
listeners.
That's
And
with
then-
anybody too. It's not just your partner. It's like somebody at work. It's like, let me understand what you just said. I want to repeat back to you what I thought you just told me. And you can start in the beginning by saying, "I'm sorry that you feel this way,"
Okay.
or "I'm sorry that I did this to you," and it's okay to take the blame. And then you want to repeat back, "I left my underwear, I did this, this is what you're seeing," right? And then that's where you want to start. So now you're validating the person. So what happens to you now? Now you just accused me of certain things. What happens to you when I state it back to you and I say, "I'm sorry you're feeling this way"?
I think I'm gonna feel better.
Yeah.
I think I'm
Yeah.
gonna be feeling super
You're-
happy.
yeah.
Though you're probably gonna do that again, right?
Maybe, but the thing is, like initially, and you want to make the person take a sigh of relief and say, "Okay, you know what? He's listening to me."
Yeah. No, and that makes a lot of sense because
I
if
didn't
the
get this
person
every
is
time.
not listening, you can repeat that 20 times, and if we are not listening, that's gonna keep spinning, and nothing is gonna change. And as we talked before, there is a way of communicating as well, right? Not being aggressive and trying to pass the message in a nice way, right? So listening and communicating. Any other technique for that listening, talking thing go in a better way?
Yeah. So obviously being attentive is really important. Attentive. You look like you're attentive. You maybe are apologizing for the pain that you're causing and things like that is very, very important. Then the next thing is then you have to kind of make sure that you could fix the problem. And that's where the difficult part comes in because it might be something that you don't really care about. Like some people are okay with the clothes being on the floor. Like they're just like, "Okay, I take this stuff off, I put it on the floor. That's fine for me. Because if I want to wash it, I'll just pick it up off the floor and put it in the washing machine." Some people are like that, so it doesn't bother. But the point is that when you're living with somebody, there's a give and take. There's a compromise. There's, you have to do a little bit, I have to do a little bit. We both have to do something in order to coexist in the same household.
But
And
again,
that's what we're doing right now, coexisting in the same household.
coexisting in the same
That's what
household.
everybody with the COVID situation is like. Now it's like everybody is like doing this on a regular basis long term, and it's really, really tough.
Without being able to run away. No, but
Yeah.
that comes down again, and that's why I want to connect to the 5 love languages, because some things that are important to you are not important to the other person, and some things that are important to the other person is not important to you at all. Anyway, and then from our conversation previously, you said that there is this thing about there is just a broadcast when it's just
Right,
one
so
person
that-
talking all the time.
Yes.
But I'm
Well,
gonna
there's
just go
three.
for the 3 and then you go
Okay.
and you explain. The second one is when both are talking and nobody's listening. That reminds me of my ex-marriage. And the third one is interactive. So I ask you, where do you think a relationship is? At first, when there is a broadcast. At second, when both are talking, nobody's listening. Or the third, there is an interaction. So what's the difference between broadcast and both talking, nobody listening?
So I'll talk about an example, and I'll use your example of the clothes on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So let's just say the wife is the one that is upset because the clothes are on the floor. So he might be in the bedroom, and she'll say to him, like, she'll yell from the kitchen, make sure you pick up those clothes from the bedroom. Right? That's what she'll say. She'll yell it up to the bedroom or wherever the bedroom is. She'll yell to him and say, like, make sure you pick up those clothes off of the floor. So anyway, maybe he doesn't hear her. Maybe he's focused on something else.
Or he then goes through here, gets out through
that
here.
Could be too. He's like, oh, she's nagging me again, whatever it is. So he then leaves the room, doesn't pick up the clothes, and then later on, she's like, I told you to pick up the stuff. Why didn't you do it? That's broadcasting. So that's like broadcasting without interaction. There's
just saying, you don't even care if the person is listening.
Well,
just saying
I wouldn't say that, because you do want the clothes picked up. Like, you're yelling this and you want the clothes picked up, but you think it's enough just to broadcast the message. And I'm not saying you in general.
Of course not.
It's just a general comment, right? So a lot of times that what we do when we get into this subconscious mode, what we want to do is we just want to state our pain. Right? We just want people to know our pain.
It out.
We're just venting. We're telling people. We're yelling it. That's the place that we're at, and that's our subconscious, our habits that we kind of get into. The next level is kind of what you said, is like one person's talking, the other person's talking. Both people are talking, maybe about the same subject, maybe not. But the two people are just talking at each other. There's no listening, it's just talking. Like, I'm talking, you're talking, I'm talking, you're talking, we're talking at the same time, but there's no interaction. Like, I'm not saying like, oh, I didn't know that. Like, I'm sorry that I made you feel that way. Like, there's no interaction. There's no, like, I'm sorry, or
the information is just hitting and going back, hitting, going back. It's not being in.
Yeah, it's just going through. Like you said, in through one ear, out the other, but then I'm saying something else. Somebody told me one time, there's a reason why we have two ears and one mouth. We should be listening more than we're talking. So, but I think that's true for everybody. Like, I tend to learn more when I just sit and listen to people.
And that's what you do with mediation.
Yeah,
at first.
That's
right?
exactly right. I'm a great listener, and I just like, that's what I like. I like to hear people. I just like, I feel like I learn so much more when I'm listening to them than when I'm talking.
I catch myself a lot. Like, I'm not listening, especially nowadays that I'm so overwhelmed with so much time in the screen. Right? And then your mind just goes somewhere else and just keeps spinning around. And I'm going to keep reinforcing that. I think being present, and I like to talk about this as well, because you have the thoughtful mind, the one that is virtual mind, is always spinning around things. You have the present mind. The present mind is where you are, what you feel, talking to someone, feeling your body, looking to the sky, feeling the nice air going through your nose, how your body feels. And the virtual mind, when your mind is just spinning around about what happened in the past, what's going to happen in the future with the coronavirus, what's going on in the news, oh my God, I still have to work, oh, what's going to happen, my son is not going to school. So it's that thing, and that's spinning around in the brain, and then someone is trying to pass a message to you, you're already so overwhelmed that you don't even want to listen. And I think this might be going really strong right now between the couples, especially if you're married and you have kids, and now the kids are not going to school, and you still don't know about your income or what's going to happen. So I feel that can be a big aggravating. I understand people might be just like trying to communicate, but again, if you're not being able to be present, stay present, and listen to what the other person is saying, you're just not going to go anywhere.
True.
And I catch myself nowadays more like this. Because, it's so much going on, I just don't want to listen. And then the person starts talking to you, your brain is already overwhelmed, and that becomes so aggravating. And depending on the way the message is going, that
Right.
turns
Well,
into worse.
I do sometimes hate to go to the gender thing because there's a lot of people that are gender sensitive, but I am going to go to the gender thing because I think it helps the majority of the people.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes when women get frustrated, they talk about a lot of different things all at one time. The man cannot listen. Most of the time, the man can't hear all of those messages.
In the straightforward, women can multitask, men cannot. I think that's pretty much okay.
Yeah, well, that goes back to the cave when the women had to make sure that the kids were safe and there was nothing happening outside. But then the man had to make sure he got the saber-toothed tiger. Like he had to focus. So I think men sometimes are better at focusing on one thing, and women are better at like overall like making sure that everything is good and okay. So I think there is definitely a primitive brain aspect there of both genders. Some people think like, oh no, men are just like men are just like women are just like men, it's just how we're brought up. That's not true.
Mm-hmm.
It's just scientifically it's wrong because, and people are going to hate me for saying this, but when men are born, they have two separate brains. They have the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere of the brain. Women, when they're born, women, girls or baby girls are born, their two brains are fused together. Both of them are talking, and this is a biological thing where their brains are basically connected. The reason why men can sometimes be more logical and rational is because their brains are disconnected. So the emotional part is separate from the logical part. So the left and the right. Does that make sense?
Why are you saying that now?
So the reason why I'm saying it is because when women are talking about something, they're grabbing from both of their brains. Emotionally and logically, everything is just coming out all at once. Where a man, he would need to more concrete. He needs to take one thing at a time and say like, okay, let's solve that one thing. Once we have that solved, let's go on to the next thing and let's do that.
I kind of get it. So we have to keep it simple for them because they can't keep up with us. So just be straightforward, one simple thing, one information, make him repeat, right? And that might work.
Yeah, I think it might. It's going to be very difficult for a woman to do that. It's going to be really difficult. So I would almost say if you're talking to your man, tell him, like the first thing the man should do is he should just, just say like, I'm sorry you're feeling this pain. Just to put the person at ease. Because then once he puts the woman at ease, the woman will then be able to project the one thing that's maybe really bothering her.
And that makes
he
a lot
could
of
also
sense.
say that. He said, what is this really coming down to? Like, why are you really upset? Like, I'm hearing all these different things, but what's really making you angry right now?
I think if he says that, if my partner would say that, right out of the bed, I would calm down and I would be in a better place to proceed with what I'm trying to say. Yes. So that's the broadcast when both for, and then the third one is interactive. You can start. I'm just gonna get a charger. I'll be right back.
Okay, yeah. So the interactive is basically where one person is speaking and the other person is doing like, just listening, validating what's the person saying, and there really should be no judgment. We've talked about this before, where sometimes we're basically saying to the other person, well, how could you not know? Like we do the checkbook all the time. How could you not know that you're supposed to write in and reconcile the checkbook and know that we have enough money in the bank to write another check? And it's easy to judge people because we're looking at people from our own perspectives instead of from the other person's perspective, which that other person has different talents, they have different experiences, they grew up in a different way, and that's why we have to stay away from judging anybody, any human, a partner or anybody. We can't judge them because they did not walk in our shoes and we didn't walk in their shoes for their whole lives. So how could we possibly know what they're going through? The only way to really be empathetic is to try to listen to what they're saying, what their pain is, and then think back of when you had that same pain and what it was related to. And that's the only way where we can try to communicate in a more empathetic way and maybe not judge the person. So, and then another technique would maybe look at body clues. Like I'm looking at your clues and maybe how you're turned, and you know, if you're turned away from me like this, maybe you're saying one thing and you don't sound pissed, but I know you're pissed because your knuckles are white and you're really holding on tight to the table or the chair or something, and that's how I know you're really upset. So I have to watch the body language. I have to make sure I have eye contact. I'm looking at your face and you know that I'm listening and we're engaged. And then it's an interactive discussion. I don't interrupt you. I wait till you finish, and I could even say, "Are you finished?" You know, I just, you know, and then that's when I have to start validating you and then talking about and trying to get down to what the problem is. But then also, it can't be where the problem happens over and over again afterwards, because you said it would probably still happen again. That's the thing that has to really happen next, is the change has to happen afterwards. Something has to change.
I just liked what you said before, and I think it's a good practice.
I have to get
If
the
you
eyes.
catch yourself, if you interrupt your partner when he's talking all the time, or if you're patient enough to wait for your partner to finish saying everything he has to say until you say the next thing. I don't know if I could pass that test, but I think it's a good way to start understanding if you're a good listener or not, right? Now, if you're listening to all of this and you think, oh my God, yeah, I have nothing of that, this is what's going on, nobody's listening, and we're just broadcasting and saying things without really caring about what the other person is saying, and it's all good. You know, I always say that I compare my fitness wellness work with, like, if you're being cheated on, right? You don't know you're being cheated on, you just live your life and you don't care about it. But once you find out about it, then comes the fact that you have to do something about it, and that's the next step, right? So, for example, for people that see themselves into that situation, what would be a good recommendation? Right now, they realize they are not listening. One person is just talking, the other is not listening, or whatever, broadcast,
Right.
whatever it's
So
going
let's
on.
just say if you have to almost make sure the other person knows what you're feeling, what your emotions are, and things like that. So if you're talking to somebody and you feel like they're not listening to you, you have to immediately stop what you're saying and just say the person's name, address them, talk really slowly, and say, I feel like you're not listening to me. I'm sensing that you're not listening to the words that I'm saying. And the other person might say, no, I'm listening. I'm hearing everything you're saying. Just do me a favor and just repeat back to me what you think you heard me say. And then at that point, you know if the person was listening to you or not. And if they can't repeat back and they get confused, then you could say, this is what I said. Put your hand on them in a nice way. Not in a very physical way, but yes, right. Not in a jujitsu kind of way. And you say, just hear what I say. The clothes are on the floor. It really frustrates me. Do you understand how much pain I have when I come in the bedroom and I want to have a nice bedroom? I made the bedroom this morning. It was all nice when I left. And then when I come back, there's clothes all over the floor.
But I think it's a good try. But if you realize the person doesn't change, you just decide if you want to move on or not. I'm just kidding. No, I like when I look back again and I look to my ex-relationship, Philip still doesn't listen until today, and I regret we never went to a therapist, right?
And not all therapists are good.
Not all of them are good, like any
Yeah.
other career, but that could have. I don't know. Some things people just need to listen from someone else. It's just you're not.
Well, that's true. There is a big part to that, and that's the reason why mediation works, because you have a third party, somebody who's not emotionally connected, who can actually listen and hear what you're saying. And a lot of times in mediation, I have to stop the conversation and say, did you just hear what she said, or did you just hear what he said? Like, I have to stop it and just say, did you hear each other? And most of the time, they don't get it right. Like, they're like, oh, I thought you said this. No, that's not what I said. Like, this is what I said. But they're immediately judging and assuming what the other person is saying.
Oh yeah, that's a strong, judging assuming. So what you did here, you took it off from the...
Yeah, so talking about next steps, I didn't do this last time, but what I'm doing now is I'm actually squeezing the cauliflower rice, because now it's really tender. I cooked it for about 15 minutes, I steamed it, and now I'm gonna get rid of some of the water in it, because we want to take out as much water as we can out of the cauliflower, so that it doesn't, so that it becomes a little more crispier inside the oven when we make it a crust. But it's really difficult to make cauliflower crispy. So I'll just put that expectation out there that it's really difficult to make crispy. And I've tried pizza ovens and things
I really
like
the cauliflower you made the other day, and the fact it wasn't crispy just was so good.
It was good.
It's good. Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 8 ounces, so half of the shredded mozzarella, I'm basically going to put in to the cauliflower, and I'm going to take the other half and I'm going to put it to the side for later, because the mozzarella actually it holds the cauliflower rice together. So that's the first thing that I have to do. And now that it's really tender and it's really hot, it's actually going to keep it, it's going to make it congeal and gel together. So the other thing I have to do is I have to add eggs. Now most recipes call for 1 egg, but I do like to use 2 because I think it does a much better job of holding the cauliflower together. So that's why I say 2 eggs instead of 1. So that's really the first step, is just to do this. And then we could put a little bit of Parmesan cheese if you want to throw a little Parmesan cheese in there. You know, not too much, maybe like a tablespoon or so, and just throw it in there for some flavor. And you can see how it's starting to come together with the mozzarella.
1 tablespoon?
1 tablespoon is good. Yep. And then we also, and there's a lot of recipes that don't call for this, but I like to add oregano into the crust, as well as I put it on the top. But if you want to add, you can add just a little bit of, like a teaspoon would be enough of oregano for this. And then we're going to mix that up some more. Now the next step is to get a cookie sheet. And we want to actually put this whole thing into the cookie sheet. Now, you know, we just steamed it now for 15 minutes, so this is going to be really hot.
Is this the cooking sheet you want to use?
And the one thing that Louise always makes fun of me is that, you know, men really can't touch hot things, but women can. They are much better. They actually have less nerve endings in their fingers, so they can actually...
No, I just think in general we can deal with pain much better than men. I think it's a genetic stuff.
Oh, where's the
There's some exceptions, but I think we are very tough and we can take it more than men can in general.
So we're missing a cookie sheet.
It can be this one?
No.
Anyway, what we were talking about before towards the how to listen and stay present, so I think it's a big issue, right? Stay present, to be able to listen, especially if it's someone that you're dealing with all the time. And I catch myself with Kawe because, you know, he's quite out all the time with me. It's hard to just disconnect, and as kids are very present, he's always like, mommy, 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 and trying to communicate, and your brain is all somewhere else, and then you just snap. I don't do that anymore. Sometimes I might, and you're just like, what? And it's just the kid bringing you back to the present, right? So being present is good, and a good way to stay present and practice to be present. It has the chicken inside down. That's what it is. We're marinating the chicken.
Okay, got it. Okay, so
is to take some nice belly breaths. The breath is gonna bring you present, and it's gonna make you calm down. This works really, really good. So if you're into that bad argument, and you're like in this argue with someone, any kind of relationship you have, and you're about to explode and you can't control, take some nice bad breaths. Focus on that. That's gonna calm you down, and it's gonna bring focus, and it's gonna bring you present. So it's really, really good if you could try to practice. Meanwhile,
Absolutely.
talking, trying to keep the emotions out of the spectrum so you can rationalize and speak and talk to the person better without hurting, trying to hurt the person's feelings for more that you are hurt or not.
And I do think that that does happen a lot, where people do try to hurt their spouse and their partner.
Did you put oil? No.
Because they want to feel the pain of the other person, and no, we didn't put.
I wasn't listening to him. But there's no need to put oil in the cooking sheet. It's not gonna glue.
Oh yes, it is a better. They actually do call for parchment paper, but I don't really like to use the parchment paper. But we're not going to use the oil this time. But anyway.
But should people put oil on the?
Yes, you could put the oil.
Is it not gonna glue?
No, I mean it's always difficult to take the cauliflower pizza out once it's in there, because it doesn't hold together like a regular pizza. So it is a little bit soft. So you have to be careful when you take it out. You want to cut it up with a pizza cutter or a knife while it's in the pan, and then you use a spatula to take out the different pieces. So that's what you want to do. That's going to be the trick, but we'll show you how to do that in a bit. Yes. So right now, what I'm doing is I'm just spreading it out. I'm making it level. And then I'm also creating like a little lip at the end, because we're going to put the pizza sauce in the middle. But right now we have to cook this for about 30 to 45 minutes. I put the oven on 400 only to get started. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce the heat to 200 degrees, because I want it to really bake through it without browning it at first. So if you could put your, preheat your oven, and let's get that started. And then when this thing is preheated, I'm going to put it in there. I'm going to put the temperature on 200, and then we're going to cook it for a half hour. And then we're going to see what it looks like at a half hour. Okay, so that's ready now. See what it looks like. And then we'll put this in the oven now.
For how long at 400 degrees?
I'm going to make it 200, and then I'm going to cook it for 30 minutes.
No, hold on. So right now, what's the temperature?
So right now I put it on 200.
Oh, right now it's 200. For how long?
For 30 minutes.
For 30 minutes. And then afterwards, how long is it going to be?
And then we're going to check it. After 30 minutes, we're going to see what it looks like. You want the cauliflower to look like a little browning, like it's browning at the top. That's what you want it to look like. So as soon as that happens, then you pull it out of the oven. But we're gonna do it for 30 minutes and then see how it looks at that point.
Okay, so feel free to grab your cup of wine, right? And I would like to start nailing into the 5 love languages.
Okay.
I would like to start bringing that up.
I think I need wine for that discussion.
So 5 love languages is the name of a book. Right, that was a book that Don gave it to me right away when we started seeing each other, and it's a very interesting book, easy to read. It's a bestseller, right? It's it just makes things a little bit easier to understand. And when I started reading the book, I was like, wow, I know nothing about relationships. How, like, we learn so many things in school, in our career, but when it comes down to relationship itself, it's like how we cannot know better. Maybe you know better. Let's check now through this conversation that we have now. But pretty much, how could you explain the book? So what do you know about the author?
Gary Chapman.
Yeah.
Do you want some wine?
Oh yes, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Do you want some wine?
Well, I was wondering, I didn't want to pour 2 glasses. I was just, I'm thinking about you first. So
I can pour you a
Yeah,
glass
you
of
can
wine. You
laugh.
can start.
all right, so the one comment I want to make about the 5 love languages is think about when our parents were raising us and they basically said, make sure that you treat everybody the way you want to be treated. Well, that's absolutely false. We can't treat other people the way that we need to be treated. We need to treat people the way they need to be treated. And we want other people to treat us the way that we need to be treated. So the way that we were raised and what everybody says is, basically incorrect.
Can you say that? That's
Want me
not
to say
right.
it again?
No, I know incorrect. Like, let's just not say that. Let's just go
Cheers.
through. Cheers. So, where do you want to get?
So the message I want to come across is that the 5 love languages, what it is, what Gary Chapman started here, is he called it languages so that we could understand it better. Mm-hmm. Because if I'm talking French and you're talking Portuguese, we're definitely not understanding each other. All right? And if you compare that to love, then you can understand it a little bit more. So there's 5 different languages that he categorized that basically says if we can understand the love language that our partner needs to have in their life, and we can address those love languages, then we would have a much better relationship.
Okay, so what would be the 5 languages?
The 5 love languages, and I have a little cheat sheet here, is acts of service.
Acts of service.
Right, so that's
we'll go
number
deep
1.
on each.
You want me to go deep now, or
First,
you
we just say them,
just say
and
them?
then we go deeper on each. So one is acts of service,
Quality time,
quality time,
physical touch.
physical touch,
The next one he calls words of affirmation.
words of affirmation,
I also call it validation, which
Validation.
he doesn't use it, and then also receiving gifts.
receiving gifts. All right, so let's start breaking that. Acts of service is the first one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what is acts of service?
So acts of service can be taking your clothes off the floor, taking the garbage out, doing things for
washing the dishes.
Yes, washing the dishes. Thank
Changing
you.
the diaper.
Correct. Yes, all of those things are acts of service. The only thing you have to be careful of, though, with acts of service is you have to make sure you're doing the acts of service that the other person cares about. And there's a funny YouTube video that I saw about how men treat relationships versus how women treat relationships. And it said, a man will go to a florist and he'll buy 3 dozen roses, and he'll come back and he'll be like giving the 3 dozen roses, and he'll be like, look at what I got. And she's like, in her box, she's like, check, positive. If he came home with 1 rose, he would have got that same check. And men don't realize that. They think that overabundance of something means the same thing on the other side, and that's not really the case. So where that brings me to is you have to make sure that you're doing the act of service that the other person appreciates. Mm-hmm. So if it's taking out the garbage and she thinks or he thinks that that's what should be done anyway, that doesn't help. But if she's always doing the dishes and he one night does the dishes, well, now it's an act of service. Now she feels love towards her man. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
It does. It does make sense. It does make sense, and that can come down for something that is important to one. It's not that important to the other. So that's why he's not or she's not paying attention on it and not validating it. Right? It's so important. Like every day you ask, can you please take the garbage away? Take the garbage away. And that's something that she needs, and it's gonna make you feel better. But in his head, that's not something that he cares about. It's not something that he feels loved, and he's not gonna do it. Exactly. So I think that's a good way to understand. So pretty much, if in your relationship you keep asking, help clean the house, help do laundry, help this. Why you don't never wash the dishes? Why you don't cook? Because simply on his head, that's not important, or that's not a priority on the way of.
And that's okay too. the fact that my clothes are on the floor, it doesn't bother me. That's okay. But I want to make sure that I'm sensitive to my partner's needs. And that's really where it comes down to.
And if it doesn't bother any of them, none of you, or both of you are on top of it, beautiful, right?
That's right. Doesn't matter.
That's something that clicks. So this is important. Some things click and some things don't click. So it's just right now, it's learning if these things click with the person you are with or they don't click. Right? That's it. Just acknowledging first.
Right, and the problem right now that you had mentioned before with the COVID thing is you can't just go out and run to the bar. So you can't get away. You can't go to work. Like you can't get away from the relationship. So you have to make it work or you're going to be so upset. Like the one thing they're talking about now is COVID divorces and COVID babies. So it's like from being stuck inside together, you're either having babies or you're getting divorced. So it's one or the other. This is how you're feeling. So another thing I wanted to mention with the acts of service, because you were talking about, like you would have to keep saying the same thing over and over again. It doesn't feel right. Like it puts you in a very bad place. You're very frustrated. I don't know if anybody knows the name John Gottman, but he's like an expert in the relationship field. And he talks about relationships more from a scientific perspective. And what they say is 5 positive touches a day, 5 positive touches
but that
with
goes
your
to
partner.
acts of service or is something
Well, that's
else?
where I want to get to because it does relate to the love languages. So 5 personal touches a day is a good relationship. 18 a day is a master relationship. If you can do 18 positive touches a day, then you would have a great master relationship. Now, what I'll say about each of those personal touches, it could be just a hand on the shoulder, my hand on your hand. It can be me doing something for you. It could be me bringing home a rose for you. Like all those different things, whatever I know makes you feel good, whatever your love language is, and there's more than one, there's 5 of them, you're going to put them in a priority. Like this one's really important, and this other one down here is the 5th one. I don't really care about that too much. Like gifts received. I don't really care if I get any gifts. Like for me, that's number 5, like it's at the bottom. At the top is physical touch. Like I really like physical touch. So like
he's crossing the line. He's just going through all the options already. Let's go to option 2 and then we can get that because now you're talking about the others.
Well, the reason why I was relating it was the positive intervention with the other person.
Yes.
So if their love language is acts of service, then if you did the dishes one night where you don't normally do the dishes and that's something that she does or he does, and you took it on that one night, that's one positive interaction because you're now doing it for the other person who acts of service is important for. So that's how I was trying to relate it to. So the next one is, let's say words of affirmation.
Words of affirmation, okay.
Which is also validation. It's like me validating what you're saying. It's me validating what you're doing. Like, oh, I noticed you took the clothes off the floor. It's like, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate that. Now the guy or the girl is basically looking at the other person saying like, oh yeah, thank you. Thank you for telling me that. I feel really good now. You made me feel really good.
Just turning around and say, wow, you look so handsome today.
Sure.
That's words of affirmation.
Yeah.
Or to your child, right? Oh, I don't know. What do you say nicely to your child? I don't even know.
Yeah, maybe you say like they look so big, or they look so big.
Or your roommate, if you're stuck in the apartment with your roommate, say something nice, okay? So words of affirmation is when you say something meaningful and positive to someone.
And also you're validating what they're saying.
In validating what the person is saying.
Right, so if you tell me something and then I say to you the same thing, that's me validating you.
Okay, that's easy.
All
right, so you might be into complimenting the person
Mm-hmm.
and saying things, but the other person might not be into that, might not do that, and you might be missing that and you don't understand.
Yeah.
Or your partner might be missing that on you and you don't see that. So it's good if you start, is my partner into words of affirmation? Does he really keep complimenting me all the time? Do I compliment back? Or it's good to start thinking like that, just bringing a little bit of awareness.
And in addition to the complimenting, also if you see somebody do something and you say it to that person, like you recognized and you appreciated what they did, that's also validating them. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a compliment. It could also be like, I noticed you did this.
So it can come down like the person need an act of service.
Right.
You can validate that with the second.
Absolutely.
And you can try to implement both.
Right.
Even if you're not into that, you can try to implement that and see if that relationship can get better.
Right.
The person can just be happier.
Yeah, so an example is this. Let's say one partner, their number one is acts of service, and the other partner is words of affirmation or validation, right? So that's the top one for the two people. If the one for words of affirmation does an act of service that the other one loves, and then that person then comes back and says, I noticed that you did this for me, thank you. The other person feels great, this person feels great, because they both did something for each other.
And you already have a better relationship scenario.
That's it.
Right? Than just not being aware and present with each other. Okay, third one.
Third one is gifts. So receiving gifts. So let's just say that you like receiving jewelry, maybe you like personal things, maybe you know, some people like different things. You know, I talked to one person and they're like, it was a woman, and she's like, oh, I appreciated when he got me a tile cutter. I'm like, you know, okay, you wouldn't think to get a tile cutter for a woman, but this particular woman liked tile cutting. So he got a tile cutter for her, and she felt really good about the tile cutter. So it's like you have to know your partner, and you have to know what kind of gifts that person likes.
I remember this part on the book when between the therapist is talking about the people that were coming to him and he's trying to help them with the relationship, and the guy saying, but I give everything, I give her presents, I pay for everything, whatever. But the person doesn't really care about that. What the person is another kind of language connection, right? Not the gifts itself. So for someone, giving gifts is really meaningful. Probably that person likes to receive gifts back as well, but some other person couldn't care less about that, is expecting something different, right? That can happen parents to kids, kids back to the parents, or into a relationship. And going back like to my marriage, it's like I could see Philip, he liked to give me gifts. He really liked to give me gifts. I don't really care, honestly, about gifts. So I wasn't very much into giving him gifts. I would give him probably the same thing over and over, right? But there was other things that in our relationship that now I look back and I see that we didn't match. And these things with the gifts is simple to look back and see how much now I can see that probably bothered him. Like when it would be his birthday, I didn't get him anything special. Like he always got me something really, really meaningful and special for my birthday. And I wouldn't have that thought towards him. And it doesn't mean that I didn't love him. I was just not aware that that's something that he really cared about. I should know better, but I didn't know better. I had no idea about how to connect these two things.
But you know what that is, most relationships. Most relationships, the one person is giving to the other person because that's how it makes them feel good. Because they're like, you know what, I would like that person to do this for me, so I'm going to do this because I really love this person, so I'm going to do to them what I need done to me.
What I would like to be, that's how I feel loved. This is what I'm going to do to the person.
Exactly. So they're coming from a good place.
Yeah.
They're really coming from a good place. But they have to reverse it and say, like, you know what, she speaks Portuguese. I have to speak Portuguese. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like to be able to have a healthy, more attentive relationship.
And you had mentioned something before about kids and things like that. This approach with languages applies to any relationship you have, anything, any work relationship. Like if there was somebody at work that really liked gifts of service and they drank coffee in the morning and you brought them a coffee every morning, they would be your best friend at work.
That can help with the boss.
Yeah,
that's nice.
Absolutely.
All right, next one.
Okay, so next one is quality time.
That's a good one.
Yes.
That's a really good one. Quality time.
Quality time. So quality time is basically, it's not necessarily quantity, but it's like the time that you actually spend with the person. And a lot of times it's being present, talking to each other, interacting, maybe walking down the street holding hands. You know, it's like, it's just being present with that person and not on your phone, which a lot of times now people are on their phone.
Or sharing screen, just sitting down watching TV doesn't really count.
It does, actually.
That's not what I read on the book.
I know, but...
That like, you can be sitting down in the living room, because that used to happen with me in my relationship. Like, he would get home, and I was home waiting for him because I wanted to have some quality time, right? I wanted to talk and interact, but then he would go to the kitchen, and then he's done. He would go to the living room, turn on the TV, exchange a few words, and it's like, no, I still need that. I need that interaction. I need to talk and, you know, exchange information, and someone listen to me and I listen to the other person.
And that's why I need to add a second component to that, because it can be mindless. There could be mindless stuff, and that's not really a connection. But if it's something that the two of you are getting something out of, either it's educational or it's something where you're maybe, you know, it's a movie or something that you're both getting something out, an appreciation of something out of it, and then afterwards you have a conversation about what you just experienced together. It was a connection that the two of you made together, and then you discussed it after it was over. Like, that's what has to really happen. If the two of you are mindless, just sitting on the couch and mindlessly watching something, or maybe one is on the couch and the other one's walking around, well, that's not really a connection.
Yeah,
so I want to make the difference between the two.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
A lot of times we would there and he would be on his phone, and I was just like, not that I'm a saint, I'm not a saint, but I think that can easily happen, that you're in the same place but you're not interacting. You don't have quality time together, or you're caught with your crazy life. The husband has the crazy life, the wife has the crazy life, and when they're together, they still experience their own crazy lives in independent ways, not exchanging information about how the crazy life from one person happened with the other crazy life with the other person, and there is no quality time there. Right.
Well,
I
do want to bring up something that's happening right now that I've talked to couples about just recently in the past month. And that's the fact that the quality time is being reduced and also increased. And let me explain that. The quality time is being reduced for people who have completely lost their income. So the reason why the quality time is being reduced is because now that person is stressed. They're stressed thinking about, how do I get money? How do I get money? How do I get money? And they may be doing a lot of work to try and make money. Let's just say a self-employed person, and they're doing all this work, and they're stressing out because they know no money is coming in. They don't know how long this is going to last, and it's really stressing them out, right? So how can they have quality time if they're not feeling quality themselves, right? So that goes to the self-care. The other thing that we're finding is that some people are finding that there's more quality time now, because they still have their job, they still have the money coming in, but now they're at home and they're enjoying their time with the family. So there's actually both of these things that are happening right now, where you could either be on the opposite side where the quality time got really bad, or you could be on the other side where the quality time got really, really good.
Or maybe you're not realizing about it yet, right?
Maybe.
That now you have this time available, you have someone from your family around, and instead of just stressing out about all the situation and what is going to happen, is for you to just appreciate the moment, the opportunity that you have, and make the best out of it.
Yes, correct.
Right?
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
And
Fifth one.
Fifth one.
So the fifth one is physical touch. So physical touch just means exactly what it says. Physical touch. It's hand holding, it's kissing, it's caressing, it's sex, it's intimate, it's all those things and more.
Well, you can still have sex and not very be much into physical touch. You can like sex, but not much physical touch.
Right.
Or you can just be appreciative of someone being close to you and touching you and kissing you and hugging you all the time. Or you don't like that at all.
Usually physical touch, it doesn't have to be sex. Usually physical touch could be any touch. Like it doesn't matter as long as there is touch.
I feel kind of like this is one of the things that was very clear on my marriage, how much I am into physical touch. I really like to hug and kiss. I remember in the beginning of my marriage, like I would try to lay down on the couch and put my head on top of Philip's lap, and he would like, "Oh, you're so heavy, you're crushing me." With the best intentions. That's who he is. He doesn't like physical touch. He liked sex. Sorry, Don. But he didn't like physical touch, and I do like it. I really like it. I like to get close and dance and touch and kiss, and this is something that completely made no sense between us. And now that I understand this, I look at Philip and I see this is him overall. This is him with everybody he knows. He doesn't like even to hug and this stuff. So it's not that he was doing those things on purpose to hurt me.
Right.
He just wasn't aware that for me was something so important that would make me happier. If he would just get home and come and say, "Hey, how are you?" and kiss me and hug me. So this is important in your relationship. If you understand if your partner likes those things, and how can you do things to attend your partner, or how can you communicate with your partner and say, "Listen, I do like to kiss. I do like to hug. Come here. How do you feel? Let's try to sleep close a little bit," or something like that. It's good to you to try to get to the other person to understand. So
the message I'm going to basically give right now is to people who are maybe in the beginning of a relationship or don't have a relationship yet. If you like physical touch, the worst person you could find is somebody who doesn't like physical touch. That is the worst combination. If you don't like physical touch, you basically you can't provide love for the other person. You just can't do it because it makes there are people who hate physical touch, and if you're with somebody who hates physical touch, that relationship is just doomed because if they provide physical touch, it makes them feel bad. And then the other person is like, if they want physical touch, they're making the other person feel bad. And then, when they do physical touch, they're actually not doing it in a loving way. Mm-hmm. They're doing it because they have to, and it's almost like frustrating them to actually do it. So that's the one thing that's a really difficult language. Like if you really
let's say not doomed, so just difficult.
It's difficult.
Difficult.
Yeah.
You never know.
I say doomed because I don't know anybody who can survive like with that combination. I really
you don't know, but Mike.
No, it could be, I guess. But all the other ones you basically can do, like gifts you can do. It doesn't make you feel bad. Acts of service you can do. It doesn't make you feel bad. Like physical touch is something that is just really, really for
natural
some people.
To you or not.
It's personal. It's like it's such a personal thing. Like some people just need their space.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult to get in with somebody like that. If you like physical touch, it's really difficult to be with somebody like that. And also the same thing for the people who need that space. It's really difficult for them to be with somebody else because it's almost like a magnet, like a reverse magnet, where as soon as they come, they're repelling backwards. Mm-hmm. Because you're coming, they're repelling. Mm-hmm. So it's not a natural thing. Yeah. So that's why I use the word doom.
Yeah. So when I look back, I look at all these things in my relationship, and I'm able to understand why that relationship didn't work. Maybe if I knew about these things, I could have worked better on them. Maybe, who knows? But that's the pathway, right? I'm pretty sure that you, with your previous marriage, you didn't know.
No, of course not. I mean, these are the things that we learn over time, right?
Yeah.
And we listen to other people, and that's the other reason for listening to people, to get their experiences and to understand where they're at.
So that's why I ask now. If you have any questions, anything that you wanna bring it on, just shoot a message, or I don't know, how is that pizza crust now?
I'm gonna check. Let's see. Let's see how it's doing.
Yeah, I hope this has been very useful and interesting to you, because I do think it's something so
Not
crucial
ready.
to understand. Well, the pizza crust is not ready yet. Huh. Yeah. So yeah. So now how do we do it? There is still more, what? How long for the pizza?
Well, it doesn't really.
It's still at 200?
It's still at 200. I mean, you could raise the thing is, when you raise the temperature, it's going to cook on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
When you lower the temperature, it cooks on the inside, and that's what gives it more of a. It holds together better.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we could raise up the temperature and make it cook quicker, but then it won't cook as much on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
So
how long do you think there is still?
I'm thinking like 10 more minutes.
10 more minutes. And
Yeah.
how is the person that is home gonna know if it's ready or not?
Well, they basically have to look at it, because I could take this one out and show them, but it's more like right now when I look at the crust, it's still white.
Mm-hmm.
Like it doesn't have any browning to it at all.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you see browning, like an even browning across the whole thing, and if your oven cooks a little bit off, you may have to turn the pan just so it browns evenly on all parts of the crust, but that's what you want to look for.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit of browning on the whole top.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there anything else you want to say? Anything you want to bring it up towards what we talked?
Let's see. What can we talk about?
How could someone address these things with the partner? Is there anything? You just try to speak slowly, try to I don't know, how to address, for example, acts of service.
Mhm.
How can what's the best way to approach someone and make that person understand that this is something that really bothers you?
Yeah. Well, the thing that I guess upsets me a little bit is when people are always saying you have to communicate better. Everybody's like, well, communication is the basis for everything, right? Communication, talking, and all that. The only problem is nobody really talks about how you communicate.
How
Like,
to communicate.
how
Yes.
should you communicate? Like, what should you do? Like, and that's why I mentioned before, making sure there's eye contact, we're facing each other, even body language, we're facing each other and we're talking to each other. And I'm watching the body language, I'm making sure that we're both present, we're not looking at our phones. It's okay to look away. You might think the person's not listening, but looking away is actually a way of like going back in your brain and thinking about something. And then you come back and you have eye contact again. So don't necessarily look at like the eye contact moving away as a bad thing. It's actually a better thing, because then the person is actually thinking about what you said instead of just coming back at you. If somebody just looks at you and they just respond right away, that was the other thing too, taking 3 seconds before you respond, because that gives you an opportunity to go to our conscious mind instead of our unconscious mind or subconscious mind.
Mm-hmm.
Because all of us react. We can react right away. You tell me something, I react right away. And then my eyes don't go away because I'm not thinking. I'm just reacting.
Mm-hmm.
So and the reaction is based on my programming. So all of us have a programming to us up to today. And that programming has been done by our parents, our teachers, people around us. All the experiences that we've had in our lives brings us to who we are today.
Mm-hmm.
And how we think and how we react and how we behave and how we speak. All of those things that happened came and built us as to who we are today.
Mm-hmm.
To change that programming is not easy. And it takes the conscious mind to think about what is said and to make adjustments in behavior and what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be conscious. That's
So you need a lot of patience, a lot of persistence, a lot of practice, and communication.
Yeah,
Right?
yes, and I've heard that it's 90 days before you can change a habit. So you have to practice over 90 days. You have to practice the new behavior, over 90 days for it to become a new habit.
I think anything in life is just really hard to change, right? Anything in life that is new is hard to adapt to, like this new lifestyle that we have right now, or bringing an exercise routine into your daily routine. You know, it's everything in the beginning is really, really hard. New marriage, new house, new job, new behavior pattern, new approach to the relationship. But all of those come down to how persistent you are with what you want, right? So and not expect that you're just gonna nail out of the bat, not getting frustrated with the losses or the times that you fell, but trying to learn from it. And if your relationship is something that is really, really important to you and you want to get better, at the end it's someone that you are all the time with, especially nowadays. Before I was getting divorced, some moms, some other women would come to me and say, oh, but that's normal. I barely can deal with my husband. I barely can hear him breathing around me. But at the end, it's the person that you are most of the time with, right? So you just need to choose like how you want to spend those days and those hours and the time together. Do you want to spend fighting or ignoring each other, or you want to try to build something nice from it? So I do hope that this conversation could bring a little bit of light into your life or someone that you know. Now when I talk to my friends or my clients or the girls from Handball, like I have this different perspective to look at, and I try to listen and try to help, right, based on my experience. And I'm very grateful for my divorce because I learned a lot about it. So I do hope that this talk could bring some light into the wellness in your relationship.
Yeah, and I think, a couple of things too is like when you, based on all your experiences, you're almost expecting people to behave a certain way because you have your programming and you kind of expect everybody to have the same programming. And it's not that you're thinking that. Like, people don't think like, oh, she has the same program as me. No, it's like I am just thinking, I'm reacting to what my programming is, so I just automatically assume that everybody has the same perspective that I do. And I think as soon as the moment that you can step out of yourself and look at people and try to figure out who they are and be empathetic and compassionate as to who they are and the things that they went to, I think your relationships will get better immediately, as soon as you can do that. And it's not an easy thing to step out of your own programming and kind of, from a conscious perspective, look at people in a different way.
What do you think about that pizza crust now?
Well, it's another 5 minutes, so...
So I do think we should end.
Yeah, we can
leave the pizza like that. Just leave it there in the oven.
Well, let's see. Yeah.
Well,
so the guidelines.
The guidelines now is to really wait to be a little bit more brownish, right? And then you're gonna take it off the oven, and then you're gonna place the tomato sauce and the mozzarella, right? Is that what it is?
So the next step would be sauce. You just put it on there, and don't get it too wet. Like, don't put too much sauce on, because if you put too much sauce on, the cauliflower will just become still soggy. So you want to just put a light coating of the sauce, put the cheese on top, make sure it's even on the top. I like to put oregano. You could put red pepper if you like a little spice. I like the oregano, and then you cook it. You want to just cook the top of it, so you can either leave the oven the way it is at 200, or you can put it on broil so that the cheese melts. As soon as the cheese melts and it looks really good, you pull it out of the oven and you start eating. You can let it sit for about 3 minutes or so just to let it cool a little bit, and then cut it, and then use a spatula to take out the different slices.
All right.
Good?
So this is it. I hope you got a good kick out of it. Feel free to send message, then we can talk about this. And yeah, that's it. Thank you so much.
I guess we could post pictures of the next steps too, right?
I would like you to post a picture of your pizza, eating it
Yeah.
or not. And that's it. Let's stay in touch. So next Monday I'm gonna be talking with Bonnie Bernstein. She's one of the members at the group. She's a PhD psychologist, and we're gonna talk about individual wellness, right? What can we do right now to feel good? And this is just you and you with yourself. We are gonna be making homemade coconut milk. It's my favorite thing in the world because it's super easy and it's super healthy. All you're gonna need is dry coconut and a cheesecloth. That's all, in a blender. Yeah, that's pretty much 10 minutes and the thing is ready, and you can keep in the refrigerator for a week and use it as your convenience. So anyway, I hope you had a good time. Thank you, Don, so much.
You're
Sorry
welcome.
about the jokes and the rolling eyes. But yeah, I'm glad we could share the word. And yeah, feel free to reach out and give me other suggestions of other things we can approach in the next cooking, chat, and cooking and chat, cooking and chatting
And drinking.
and drinking. Cheers.
Cheers.
Mm-hmm.